Good morning everybody, Shift Your Mindset here, and we're going to do some history in the making. Because I got inspired to do a little video about the history of the Jehovah's Witnesses on a certain point, neutrality. We just had the voting in the United States. I read a while ago a book, Jehovah's Witnesses and the Third Reich by James Penton. He's born in 1932, I believe, and he was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. He was baptized in 1948, and I believe when I have it good, I have to look up some things. He just died 4 days ago, 92 years old. So, in memory of James Penton, this video, because he was serving as an elder in the congregation in the late 1970s. He developed concerns over the Watchtower Society's emphasis on the requirement for witnesses to engage in public preaching work, and what he saw as a growing harshness and intolerance in the treatment of members of the religion by those in authority. And he wrote a book, Jehovah's Witnesses and the Third Reich. And that's why I want to get a little bit deeper into with you guys about this. Because, as we know, Rutherford played a big part of how the Jehovah's Witnesses developed. He was a remarkable person, and I don't say in a good way, but he has his roots deep in this organization. He found himself very special, more than others. So, in the higher powers, that's his article of Rutherford. In 1929, Jehovah's Witnesses introduced, J.F. Rutherford introduced the neutrality doctrine for Jehovah's Witnesses. He did that in higher powers, directing members to avoid any political involvement, no voting, no military service. So he allowed Jehovah's Witnesses to even became hostile to their host governments here on earth, to carry on with activities with good conscience and, as we know, often illegal activities. And I bet you guys who are JWs who are watching, you don't know this, but do you research? It's all in the literature of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Because in this book, James Penton said that they had a new doctrine, a new way of thinking. Because what was going on? If you look at the superior authorities and their doctrines, it's mind-blowing. Because from 1886, the Russell era, 1889, a review on that, it was the superior authorities were the earthly governments. But then J.F. Rutherford took the power, and he was not a fan of Russell. So what did he do? He changed the neutrality doctrine as we still know it. But how can that be? Because it changed after him already. Why? 1929, it's God and Christ and of course the prophet J.F. Rutherford, who are the superior authorities. He didn't mention it out loud, but that's what he was thinking of himself. He was full of himself. So from 1929 all the way up to 1963, they thought and they changed their doctrine to the superior authorities being God and Christ in J. F. Rutherford. From 1963 on, it was back to the earthly governments. But it's strange for me that the churches always had the correct understanding of this, of Romans 13 verse 1. Never wavered in their view, but God's only true religion changed it from being right to being wrong. So, who's Jehovah blessing? But let's get on with that, because we never understand it. So, in this new higher powers from Rutherford, the doctrine he introduced provided Rutherford with free range to rail against secular authorities in the most extreme fashion. So they printed a lot of stuff against the governments. But the neutrality of the Jehovah's Witnesses was a very, very strange thing. Because in his book he stated that all it ever meant was that Jehovah's Witnesses were not to vote, hold public office or serve in the military of any nation. Unlike ambassadors of diplomatic officials of secular governments, whom the witnesses claim to emulate, it allowed them to manifest open hostility to their host governments and to carry on with activities with good conscience that were often illegal. For example, the Watchtower president, J. F. Rutherford, railed constantly against prohibition. And at that time the prohibition was a fact. And his agents illegally imported liquor from the Canadian branch offices of the International Bible Students Association in Toronto to Watchtower headquarters in Brooklyn without blinking an eye. Even though the US Constitution prohibited the production or possession of alcoholic beverages. But because he changed the doctrine, because he had new light, suddenly he hadn't complied to the secular authorities and he could do whatever he wanted. As a result, many ordinary Jehovah's Witnesses saw nothing wrong in smuggling dutiable articles across international boundaries or importing items for their own use that were prohibited in certain jurisdictions. Such items could include everything from margarine to liquor to illicit drugs. That is what J. F. Rutherford is all about, people. So he's making his own rules, use a religion to comply with all their things. Funny thing is, it's a crazy thing when you realize that the neutrality doctrine came about because Rutherford interpretations of higher powers. And he meant God, Jesus, and by extension also himself. He was giving the authority over Jehovah's Witnesses. Today, the higher powers are understood by the JW as the secular governments. So we have a change in doctrine. But the neutrality doctrine, which was based on the identity of the higher powers, was never updated by the JWs. was never updated to reflect their change in identity. So they changed the doctrine, but the neutrality doctrine, where it was based on, a thing they don't recognize anymore, is never changed or updated. Guys, come on. So by clinging on to a once relevant interpretation, because it isn't relevant anymore these days, but the JW organization maintains strict guidelines that limit your personal freedom. For example, what we saw yesterday or the day before, the freedom to vote. So a singular historical viewpoint continues to shape the JW religion in this practice today. So, and now they're using other arguments to maintain that view, but you know what my problem is? This is my problem, because it's you can't get out of this. And that's the strange dynamic in the organization, what confuses me. Because he is regarded as a prophet. He received divine messages from the dead Russell. How? Johannes Graeber was a medium, and he translated the Bible around that period, I thought. So it was all questionable behavior at that time. He received divine messages about the two hopes we have, about holidays, about having absolute faith in the governing body or in the president or in the judge Rutherford, how he was called. How much time you have to spend in the ministry, and the ministry, how much time you spend there buys you a spot in paradise. That's all because of J.F. Rutherford. Also maybe other doctrines, I don't know, I'm forgetting a lot of things, but this came to mind. And he clearly had things wrong, because higher powers are not God, Jesus and J.F. Rutherford, but are the secular authorities, the earthly governments here. So he was wrong. He was wrong about millions now living will never die. He was wrong about that. A big doctrine, what they were believing, that the millions who were living in that time will never die. They are all dead now. Still no Armageddon, guys. He was wrong about the great worthies, David and I don't know, who are gonna be resurrected in California in his mansion Bethlehem. He bought money from the organization. With money from the organization, he bought Cadillacs for David and other people, important people from the past in the Bible, because they will be resurrected in California. So with the money of the organization, he bought a big mansion. He bought expensive cars, Cadillacs and stuff, because they would drive in those cars. And that's one of the guys with absolute power where this religion is based on. Also his teachings. I believe the teachings also of the beards, that it's not allowed, is from the time that Rutherford was in charge. And now they're changing a little bit of things. But they still talk about him as if he was one of the people who expanded the organization and started a new eras together with Russell and stuff like that. But where is it based on? Because when you dive into J.F. Rutherford, the only thing you can think of that he's a jerk. And it's mind-blowing that so many people are following him and saw him as Judge Rutherford, the prophet from God who had everything right. Everything he predicted is proven wrong. He was a no-show in his son's life. He was a no-show in his son's life. He was an alcoholic because during the prohibition he was smuggling liquor into the country. So he is an alcoholic. He is a felony because you are importing alcohol during the prohibition, what was not a thing for good people to do. You are a felony. It was against the law and you are importing liquor. So you are a plain felon if you do such things. But in the name of God, it's all allowed and you don't have to listen to the secular authorities because you are not my higher power. Now is Jehovah and Jesus my higher power. Do you know? If we apply this in our life, we can talk anything we do wrong. We can make it smooth and go away and don't listen to other people. Don't feel guilty because it's in the name of Jehovah and it's not in the name of the authorities. So he also is accused of having an affair with his dietitian. I don't know if it's true, but even it's an accusation. So there must have been something that was not 100% right. So resources for his mansion, Betsarim, he misused resources. He's never confronted by the organization by spending so much money on things what has nothing to do with preaching work or whatever. So still, there's a high regard for J.F. Rutherford. And any teachings are still thought as an actual truth from his time. And that's mind-blowing. But in memory of James Benton, Jehovah's Witnesses and the Third Reich, it's absolute good book for you guys to read, to understand the context of that period in time. I think he wrote a lot of more books. I thought 3 or 4 books he wrote. He's a reliable source, someone who was in the organization, knew what was going on. Later on he got doubts, just like you and me. So this is a little bit of something from our history books, but I think it's good to know because that's the foundation of what this religion is based on and who played an important part in that period of time. J.F. Rutherford and the neutrality doctrine he introduced. That's my take on it for today. I think it's good to research things without being emotionally attached to it, but just look at the plain facts, what you can find, what you can search on, and what was, because it's a pattern. It's a pattern. It's always new light, new light, new light, new light, new light, and old light becomes new light again. So if you are not certain on what you're doing and you still keep on flip-flopping doctrines, and Rutherford was a smart one because that doctrine was in his advantage, because he was a prophet. He was an extension of God and Jesus himself here on earth. So his ego played a big part in how he positioned himself and also what he did with the organization and what he thought he could do without getting away with it. So if you are JW, I recommend you to read a book of someone who was close by, who knew about things, who researched also things, and you can learn a lot from the old literature around that period. And then you see that it's not only a name, because in my teenage years I knew Russell was the founder, I knew J.F. Rutherford, I knew other names, Macmillan, whatever. You knew names, but you never knew what was done by them. And now you have the time for starting critical thinking. Why are all the things he predicted, millions that now live would never die, being a felon, to import illegal liquor into the States while there is a law against it by the government, why you are buying a house with the researchers of the organization for yourself to be and to live in because of its nicer weather and it's better for your health, and David's gonna drive his Cadillacs together with you. All those stupid ideas, misusing researchers of brothers and sisters who think they're doing the right thing. And that's a shame, people, that we have to have those people within your community who are messing it up and taking advantage of following people who are thinking that they're following something what's worth living for. That's my take on today on neutrality and J.F. Rutherford. Thank you for watching. Like and share this video if you want with someone who think can help this to get a clear image of what's going on with the foundation of the whole Watchtower and Track Bible and Track Society. Have a beautiful day, people. Be kind for each other. We see each other maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I just let it flow. We see each other on the next episode.